Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. I'm really excited about today's guest, Dr. Angelo Valenti. He's a consultant, psychologist, coach. He does a lot of thought leadership, author, speaker. He's got a really interesting story and a lot of interesting ideas, cutting edge ideas for this episode. So we're going to talk all about, um, uh, the happiness, taking control, hiring, relationships. There's nothing hold back. We're going to talk about his books, changes, and I'm really happy to welcome him to the show. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Yeah. All my friends call me Chris, so please do the same and I'll call you Angelo if that's okay.
Absolutely. That's perfect.
Yeah. Excellent. So set the stage, your experiences, what you do, and we'll dive right into the conversation.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, I'm a consulting psychologist. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. I got my PhD from University of Georgia. I taught college for 4 years. I was chairman of the psychology department at Oklahoma City University for 3 years. Then I joined a consulting firm, RHR International. They moved me to Memphis and learned how to consult with businesses and fell in love with it. Love working with leaders, love working with people who aspire to be leaders. And they kind of taught me how to do what I ended up doing for the next 40 years. And in 1982, I moved to Nashville to set up my own consulting practice. And for the last 41 years, I've been working with businesses to help them hire the right people, develop the talent in their organization, and work with leaders, not only to help them be the best leaders they can be, but to help them live their best lives, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, I love that. So kind of talk about so you've kind of been you've done this whole entrepreneurial pathway and kind of talk about these well, first thing is basically taking control of your life. A lot of people are still, they have their employers and they're either miserable, they want out, but they don't have control. Kind of talk about taking control of your life.
Well, that's the key to really, I think, living a happy and successful life is to take as much control of your life as you can. And you have to recognize that a lot of things really are not under control. So the things that you can control, you should control to the nth degree. You can control how you react to different situations. You can't control which way the wind's blowing, but you can trim the sails. So you can always decide how you're going to react to a situation. You can control your own emotions. You can control what you say to people. You can control how much influence people have over you. So we have more control than we think we do. And what's happened to a lot of people is we've given up that control freely. We let other people have an impact on them that they don't have to have. For example, social media, a lot of people, their whole mood, their whole day, their whole week, their whole year can be influenced by what strangers think of the posts they put on social media. And when really, they really don't make any difference at all.
Yeah. It's really funny because it's actually because your degree of happiness is the degree to how much control you have over your life. And it's interesting because these paradigms were basically a high paying stable job that was kind of your key to happiness a couple of years ago, not so this day and age, but kind of this control. So you're talking about controlling your time, your income, who you associate with, who you spend, and where you live, all these things. So and I love that. And it was funny because a lot of there's this meme on social media where there's these Instagram models, they kind of they live in kind of bad situations, but that's kind of like their dopamine hit for the day is to get like thousands of likes on Instagram,
Right.
So,
well, that's a problem where people watching social media, they're watching other people's edited, scripted, retouched, fake videos that they think are real, and they compare their life to what those people are supposedly doing when they're not really doing that. And they feel like they don't measure up when
Yeah.
the paradigm is wrong. They shouldn't even be comparing themselves. It's like comparing yourself to a character in a movie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, and it's so funny because you know, a lot like there's also these videos where it's kind of like they have everything like lighting, setup, background, kind of get that perfect image. And you know, really, if you actually were in that studio, it's kind of like a dump, and you
Right,
know,
right.
um,
And then you're sitting there, you're watching that, you're sitting there in your sweatpants eating Cheetos, and of course you don't feel like you measure up, but it's just a totally scripted art. It's an artificial situation. You're comparing yourself to something that's not real.
yeah. Yeah. You know, talking about, you know, we're kind of talking about, you know, the downsides of social media, and then talk about kind of relationships and kind of the keys to building successful relationships. And it's also, you talk about, you know, you don't get what you ask for, you get what you settle for. So talk about that.
Well, relationships are, everybody's looking for good relationships. Nobody wants to be in bad relationships,
Yeah.
but they end up doing what other people expect them to do or trying to put on a false front. For
Yeah.
example, when you go on a first date,
Yeah.
you're putting that's the best you're ever going to be, is what you're putting out on a first date. So right away, you're setting an unrealistic expectation for the person that you're on that date with, and they're doing the same thing. So relationships depend on shared values, shared interests, um, and the people that end up in successful relationships. You think about the relationships that you're in that you enjoy being in. There's something in common that you two have that make that relationship work.
Yeah.
And too many people try to force, they're looking for what they think they ought to have in a relationship. And again, it's not realistic. There's an old saying that a man marries a woman hoping she won't change, and a woman marries a man hoping he will. And they end up both being disappointed. And in my book, I talk a lot about the big key to a successful relationship is understanding each other's quirks. Quirks are those idiosyncrasies. Everybody has them. Some people tap their fingers on a table. Some people pull on their ear. Some people are really sloppy. Some people have to be everything has to be totally perfect in their house or wherever they are. And those are
Yeah.
quirks. We all have them. They're the little idiosyncrasies that make us unique. And
Yeah.
if you're in a relationship where the other person not only understands your quirks, but embraces them and finds them endearing,
Yeah.
you have a chance to be in a successful relationship. If you're
Yeah.
constantly trying to change the other person or wish the other person wasn't the way that they are,
Yeah.
you're bound to be disappointed.
Yeah. It's interesting because you know, I was talking with another client the other day, and we're talking about how society paints this Disney World fairy tale, a lot of shoulds, you know, basically, you know, you shouldn't have any hardship or struggle, you know, you should go to college, you know, get a high paying job, get married, have kids, buy a big house, buy fancy cars, go on vacation, you know, show this to the world. And it's what you're describing is basically all, you know, all these shoulds and all these, um, basically they said it, you know, she described it as a Disney World fairy tale where, you know, you have to, and it's causing a lot of problems and unhappiness. So, you know, all these, you know, especially relationships, you know, basically kind of were modeled after Hollywood in you know, so kind of talk about, you know, kind of what can people do to learn to love themselves, the path they're on, kind of understand that, you know, this portrayal by media and, you know, Hollywood and society is just a, you know, a fictional fairy tale.
Right. Well, you mentioned a great word there. That word is should. And when I hear my clients talking about they should do this or they should do that, I call that psychological diarrhea. That's where you should all over yourself. And, uh, if you're realistic in your expectations, you realize you have certain strengths, certain weaknesses, certain advantages, certain disadvantages. And if you embrace those and just be true to yourself, then you can learn to love yourself for who you are. Everybody's unique. Everybody has a story to tell, and everybody's experiences have brought them to where they are. What we are today is the sum total of all of the decisions that we've made in our life and all of the relationships that we're in. So if you're dissatisfied with your relationships and with your life the way it is now, take a brief look at the decisions you made to get you there and start making better decisions or different decisions to get you out of that situation. For example, some people let themselves get out of shape physically, and it affects not only their physical health, it affects the way they look at themselves. It affects the way other people look at them. So there are things that anybody can do to get themselves in better shape physically. I'm not saying run a marathon, but I think it's possible to get a little more exercise than you're getting. It's possible not to eat as much junk food as you're eating. It's possible to get more rest than you're currently getting. There's things people can do if they just choose to do it. And people are great at coming up with excuses for why they're not doing, but the time to do it is right now. If you want to make changes in your life, if you want to learn to love yourself more, the time to start is right now, not later, not 5-10 years down the road. What good is that going to do you? So start right now to decide that just because a situation is the way it is now doesn't mean it has to be that way in the future.
Yeah. So well said. And then kind of talk about when, the kind of biggest changes you've seen in business over the last 40 years, and talk about, what every company should look for when, hiring new employees, given, what you've talked about so far.
There have been so many changes over the last 40 years. When I started my practice in 82, and I assessed candidates for employment, internal and external candidates, and I'd end up writing a report. And when that client wanted the report, they had like 2 or 3 choices. If it wasn't a local client, I'd send it in the mail. If it was a local client, they could either have somebody come and get it, or I could take it over to them, or I could put it in the mail. Then eventually faxes came along, and eventually email came along. So the accessibility to transfer information has gotten so much faster over the last 40 years. So technology in general, my long distance phone bill in 1982 was probably $300-400 a month. And that's in 1982 dollars, because long distance was really, now my long distance phone bill is nothing basically. So that's changed. The number of minorities, females, people of color, the workforce is much more diverse than it was 40 years ago. It was very rare 40 years ago for me to work with a female executive, leader, business owner. Very common now. And that's one of the great advances. We have, as I said, a much more diverse workforce. The third thing that's changed is people's expectations for their job. 40 years ago, for example, if an executive was due for a big promotion, but he or she had to move from Nashville to Seattle, if it was a big promotion, they just upped and moved. You didn't think about it. It was part of the deal. If I'm going to advance with this company and I like this company, I'm going to have to move. Now people take lifestyle much more into account when they're thinking about their career. Maybe they want to live in a particular city. So they may decide they're going to take a demotion or a lateral move to live in the city that they want to live in. And if employers don't treat their team in a way that makes them feel appreciated, empowered, give them opportunities to learn, inspire them to be the best version of themselves, people are very quick to quit a business that they're not enjoying working at. And I think it's important for you to enjoy where you're working, because you're spending 8, 9, 10 hours a day there. You're spending more time with your coworkers than you are with your family most of the time. So you ought to enjoy it. Those are some of the big changes. But I will say that good leaders 40 years ago would be good leaders today, because good leaders inspire people. They create a vision. They give people an opportunity to grow, and they get excited about what the company, what the business is doing. That's always been the case. And but I do think that people's expectation for work is one of the big changes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. And I think especially COVID really splashed cold water on everybody's face, made them wake up and were like, if this is not the life, you have only one life. So, make the most of it. And especially Gen Z, man, like they will, like, if they walk into work and like they don't resonate with the company, they will up and leave. Like, no, they'll just
in a heartbeat. They will. It makes it very difficult, because I don't think Gen Z workers are unmotivated. I think they're differently motivated, and you've got to tap into what motivates them. They want to feel that there's something part of something bigger than themselves. They want to feel that it's a workplace that appreciates them. But the idea of loyalty between an employee and a business is not what it used to be. I don't think there's much loyalty on the company's part, and I don't think there's much loyalty on the employee's part either.
Yeah. Yeah. We're both renting jobs and employees. Yeah. And it's quite interesting your thoughts on the executive promotion, because I was talking to my colleague, and same thing happened. Was like there's a new opportunity, but then he's at an established place for 15 years. He's doing well, and he's like, and he turned down that opportunity, even though, because he's like, I don't want to take that risk. What happens if I make a move, my entire family, and it goes south? I'm not taking that risk. So a lot of people are just kind of like on the safe, play it safe. They don't want to make big moves. So
no, and this just happened within the last 2 months. An individual I know got a promotion that required him to move from Nashville to Pennsylvania. It's a great opportunity for him. So he takes the job, moves the family up to Pennsylvania. 2 months later, the company's up for sale. They didn't tell him about it when he uprooted his whole family and moved to Pennsylvania. So he might be out of a job in Pennsylvania where he doesn't know anybody. And another situation, one of my very favorite executives that I work with on 3 different companies now, he was offered a COO job. The company was in Columbus. He was living in Charlotte. His family told him, we are not moving from Charlotte. So the company, he wanted to be a CEO. So the company said, okay, you can commute, you can remote work, live in Charlotte and work in Columbus. And 6 months later, the owners of the business said, we really want you to be CEO, but you have to move to Columbus. And he said, that wasn't the deal when you hired me. So to his credit, he resigned, and he got a CEO job with another business that's headquartered in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, but he still gets to live in Charlotte. So that was a win-win. But businesses that aren't honest with people kind of get what they deserve.
Yeah. So kind of talk about, where your book, where people can find it, and I'm going to check it out as well, and how they can follow you on socials, check out all your work, etc.
The name of my book is You're Making This Way Too Hard. Find Your Easy Way to Enjoy Life. It's got a lot of practical tips. We talked about control, decision-making, relationships. There's a chapter about money. because I think money, people don't understand how money really works in terms of how it affects their life. Got a lot of personal stories, because I think by sharing my journey, I can give people some ideas of maybe what to do, what not to do, because I've made a bunch of mistakes along the way, as everybody has, but I've learned from them, and I have fun telling about them now. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it where other places books are sold, Barnes and Noble and various other book outlets. You can find me on LinkedIn at Angelo Valenti, PhD. You can find me on Facebook, Angelo Valenti. You can find me on Instagram. My website is angelovalenti.com. Very simple. If you want to book a discovery call and find out how we might be able to work together, you can go to reachangelo.com, and that'll take you right to my calendar. And I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, angelo@angelovalenti.com.
Yeah. And be sure to follow Angelo on all his channels, leave a 5-star review, check out his book as well. Interesting thing is, in the book is the only problems money solves are money problems.
Money problems. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's like it's basically, you see people winning the lottery, and then like a year later they're dirt broke and they're
Right.
unhappy. So yeah. So
and so many rich people that supposedly have everything are miserable.
yeah.
Right. And they're more miserable because everybody's telling them, what do you have to be miserable about? And money isn't the answer. Money is a tool.
Yeah.
It gives you more choices. That's all it does.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And what a way to end the show. And I really enjoyed this conversation. And thanks so much for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I had a good time. Appreciate it.